Time to check out a Stan Kraychik mystery, Book 5. Author, Grant Michaels. Publisher, St. Martin's Press, New York, 1996. Narrator, Eric Aust. Chapter 27. The wind and rain were gushing violently, pushing me around, knocking me off balance. Only fools like me and maybe an overzealous meteorologist would be out in a raging hurricane. The waterfront was deserted. Every craft was secured to its mooring. For whatever good it did, the smaller boats bounced around in the choppy water like toys in a bathtub, while the larger ones tugged their lines tautly enough to strum a tune on. A sign over the entrance on the longest pier read, Blue Water Tours. At the far end was moored the largest of the tour boats. Another sign hung further down the pier. It was heavy metal, yet was being blown about like paper. It advertised a wondrous glass-bottomed vessel. In balmier weather, I imagined hordes of vacationing Midwesterners, free at last from their landlocked status, cooing delightedly at the aquatic circus within the coral reef and the tropical waters. But that dark and stormy afternoon, all the drama was above the water. The big glass-bottomed boat rocked and lurched precariously in the huge swells, its bow occasionally rising up out of the water at 30 degrees. My sensitive tummy reeled at the sight. Then at one particularly bad swell, through the howling wind and great crashes of water, I heard someone scream briefly, as though startled by the suddenness of a world turning topsy-turvy, or unexpectedly violent. It was a powerful, throaty scream, strong enough to travel through the storm. Even through the steel hull of the tour vessel, someone was on that boat. I made my way along the wharf, which swayed and twisted with every rise and fall of water. Like an aquatic roller coaster, I stopped to gather my wits and my courage, and my balance too. What if I fell in? Me, who can't swim. I tried hanging on to the cord railing, but it was too slick with rain, and it moved contrary to the wharf, making me more unstable. So I let it go, and stumbled toward the tour boat, unassisted. It was a runway walk that would have tested the most champion drag queen in flats without a cocktail. With the boat and the wharf heaving and lurching against each other, I caught only brief glimpses inside the main cabin. But I did see lights further down the boat's hull, so I moved closer toward those windows. There was a sturdy piling at that point, too, so I had something relatively solid to hold on to. Still, with the endless counterpoint of yawning and pitching between the tour boat and the wharf, I saw only fragments of the drama within the boat's main cabin. Nancy Drew and Edsel Sham were inside. Both of them gripped a brass railing that surrounded the large glass viewing window mounted horizontally in the boat's hull. But they weren't admiring the watery world beneath the boat. They were facing their victim. They had bound Ross, my holiday hustler, down on top of the glass. He'd been stripped naked and secured to the viewing window with nylon mooring rope. It would have been a pretty sight looking up into the boat's hull from underwater and seeing Ross's meaty backside pressed against the heavy plate glass. But topside, Ross's nakedness made no sense until I realized his two captors were torturing him. They had put some kind of small dark things all over his body, but with the motion of the boat and the wharf, I got only glimpses. It was like watching forbidden vignettes through a peephole, Pasolini-like, where your imagination filled the unseen frames with horrors or, depending on your particular perversion, delights, more extreme than any portrayed on the film. Except it wasn't a film, and Ross's torturers weren't acting. He must have realized that, too, for in those fleeting moments when I saw his face, he seemed almost to be taunting them, smiling defiantly as if he was in full control of the situation. Such bravado! Or was there a hint of pleasure, too? Perhaps he realized his chances of surviving the episode were nil. For what did the other two care about one more killing? Yet, even in this last moments of excruciating, delectable pain, Ross was trying to enjoy himself, a professional to the end. How can you not love a guy like that? There wasn't time to run and call for help. I had to get on that boat and save him, but the boat and the wharf were pitching wildly in opposite directions. One went up, while the other went down. One tilted to the right, the other to the left. I hung onto the piling until I could determine the period of sway between the two waterborne objects, and the next time around, when the boat and the wharf were moving most closely in unison, I made my daring leap from land to sea. I sprang myself upward and forward. Thank you, legs. And landed splat onto the deck of the boat with a heavy, wet thud. I prayed that Edsel and Nancy hadn't heard me from down below. There was no time to lose. I scrambled as quietly as I could along the heaving wet deck toward the hatch that led down into the main cabin. I slunk down the metal stairway, keeping in the darkness, dripping wet, hanging on to the railing for balance, while I listened to Nancy L. Drew and her cohort. "That ought to keep 'em still," said Nancy. "Did you have to hit 'em there?" said Edsel. "Did you have to scream?" replied Nancy. "Someone might have heard you." "Who's going to hear us out here? I thought the plan was to get him to talk, not beat him unconscious." "Someone had to do something," said Nancy. "He wasn't cooperating, and you were just standing there oogling him. I still don't know why you wanted to strip him." "I told you. It's research," said Edsel. Attorney Nancy L. Drew snorted and said, "Let's just hope the hairdresser knows less than he pretends to." I crept down another step and peeked into the cabin. In the center was the viewing glass. On top of the glass lay Ross's bound body, trussed up like a succulent holiday roast on a huge banquet table. His tan, taut skin was splattered with an amber, viscous fluid like motor oil. Were they about to set him on fire? Edsel said, "How much longer do we wait for this mysterious person?" "As long as it takes her to get here," said the attorney. "Why won't you tell me who she is? There are only so many women." "Because, Ed, you're not a partner. Until that Hollywood check clears, you don't own any shares. Technically, you have no right to be here now, except I needed someone to help me kidnap this traitor." "I gave you a goddamn cashier's check, Nancy. I have a right to know." "You have no rights. You had no right to stop work on the Gulf Coast Playhouse. The money I gave you more than covered that, and you promised once you were paid." "Giving the go-ahead on that part of the plan was premature," said the lawyer. "A mistake. I had to stop it." "You'd better not cross me, Nancy." To that, Attorney Nancy L. Drew laughed. Meanwhile, from the stairway, I heard someone else boarding the boat. Was it friend or foe? Cop or mere mortal? Enemy or deus ex machina? It was none of the above. "Boston!" yelled Cozy Dinette into the stairwell. "What are you doing here?" I tried to shush her, but it was too late. Nancy Drew and Edsel Sham were already hauling me out from the stairwell into the main cabin. Cozy followed us in there before anyone spoke. She saw Ross on the viewing table and exclaimed, "Rosina, why are you here? Is this a gig or a gag?" But Ross didn't answer. "Her," said Edsel, glancing between Nancy Drew and Cozy Dinette. "We've been waiting here for Cozy." Nancy Drew didn't answer him. Something had caught her off guard, and I couldn't tell if it was my arrival or Cozy's. Cozy said, "Why is Ross here and tied up like that?" Nancy Drew explained. "I had doubts about his allegiance, and I worried that he'd gone over to the other side. I had to find out, but I didn't anticipate his potent allure enough to bring the tail-wagging little Bostonian around to rescue him." "Woof!" I went. "Rescue him," said Cozy. "What for? What are you doing here? It looks like some kind of pagan ritual." "That was my ideal," said Edsel. "Research for my new book." I said, "Still plagued with doubts about your masculinity?" "Shut up," said Nancy Drew. "Let's get down to business." "What is the business?" I said. Cozy said, "Nancy told me she found a way for me to get the crow's nest back." "Don't hold your breath," I said. Edsel said to Nancy, "If Cozy's in, I'm out." "That's fine with me," said Nancy Drew. "Mindful Lotus never needed you anyway. You or anyone else." She sneered at the little group gathered around Ross's body on the viewing glass. Look at the lot of you, she said. I don't know how I ever expected things to go smoothly with a cast like this. We've got a hairdresser, a male whore. Then there's you, Cozy, a third-rate cabaret flop. Hey, what are you picking on me for? Said Cozy. I just came here to get my property back. One stinking piece of Key West property, said Nancy Drew. The crow's nest. And then you, Ed. I thought you might be smart, but all you are is a sniveling, ineffectual little writer. Look who's talking, retorted Edsel. You've done nothing but push papers around. Papers, spat Nancy Drew. You call them papers? Without those documents, you'll own nothing. The big boat tilted upward in Nancy Drew's direction. You can't take all the credit, said Edsel. Of course I can, said Nancy Drew. The boat lurched again, and Edsel shifted on his feet to keep his balance. Something crunched under his deck shoes. He cringed. Nancy Drew smiled. You're grasping, Ed. That's good. You realize you've lost to me. Never, he said. You're a loser, said Nancy Drew. Everything you do is a failure. Even your ideal for torturing Ross didn't work. Look at him, covered with honey. Honey! And where are the instruments of torture? Palmetto bugs. Gone. Run away. And Ross enjoyed it, you fool. I'm the one who had to show him we were serious. I'm the one who hit him where he felt it. Not you. Not Edsel the loser. She cackled manically and chanted, Edsel the loser. Edsel the loser. Verily, verily, Attorney Nancy L. Drew was an abomination to her namesake. Edsel defended himself with his last piece of armament. I've got a bestseller out there. You can't top that. So what? Said Nancy Drew with a taunting laugh. You still can't write. You're jealous, said Edsel, he authorial pride clearly wounded. You're nobody. On the contrary, said his opponent, I am Nancy Drew. Is that a gun? Said Cozy. I have empowered myself, said Nancy Drew. Sure enough, Nancy Drew had a gun on us. Edsel shook his head and muttered, Ever since she read that damn book about women and wolves. Then, as if to challenge the attorney's declaration of complete and confident selfhood, the boat lurched up violently and knocked Nancy Drew off balance. She grappled desperately onto the rail, slipped again, and then her gun went off, followed instantly by another gunshot, and somehow Nancy Drew went down to the floor. Ross stirred slightly on the viewing window. Edsel's mouth and eyes were hanging open. Meanwhile, Cozy Nanette held a smoking gun in her hand. You've got one too, I said. Of course I do, Boston. Haven't you figured out anything yet? Edsel stammered. Why did you do it? She was going to kill you, Ed. Cozy looked at the weapon in her hand. Geez, my aim sure is off today. I only meant to graze her. I saw that Edsel Sham had peed his pants. Cozy, I said anxiously, are you the killer? Boston, what is your problem? Edsel began rambling to himself. You killed Nancy, he said. You killed her. Okay, so I didn't trust her or any of that business with Mindful Lotus. She and Adolf made decisions without me. I knew that. I knew they were going to sell Peter's property to a European consortium, and I'd be left out in the cold. I'm screwed, but I wouldn't have killed her. Why'd you kill her? How did they get the property? I said. What? He said. The property, I said. How did Nancy and Adolf get it? They paid off some judge to reward it all to Augusta Willits. Then when she died, the property would go to the church, and from there to Mindful Lotus. But that could take years, I said. He said, they knew Augusta was terminally ill. The doctors gave her 6 months. Except Augusta conveniently got herself killed, I said, then turned to Cozy. Thanks to you. Boston, said Cozy, stop saying things like that. You don't understand, and don't look at me that way. How should I look at you, Cozy? With that gun in your hand and Nancy Drew dead on the floor. Then through the wind and rain and choppy water we heard heavy clomping on the deck overhead. The cloven-hoofed tread was unmistakable. "The Countess," I said. Cozy said, "It's about time you woke up." The Countess clomped her way down the metal stairs. She entered the cabin, wearing a phosphorus blue turban and wielding a gun. She held on to the hatchway as she gazed at Ross, lying naked on the viewing glass. "So many times," she said. "So many times I warned Peter about him. He was only good for trouble." She surveyed the cabin. "Where's the attorney?" Etzel said. "Cozy shot her," and pointed to where Nancy L. Drew was lying on the cabin floor. The Countess said to Cozy, "Now I see I cannot trust you." She aimed her gun at Cozy. Cozy was looking at the gun in her own hand, the one she just fired at Nancy Drew, as if she'd forgot how to use it. Then the Countess shot her, just like that, and Cozy went down. That's when I almost peed my pants. Etzel said shakily, "You can't just kill us all." "Why not?" said the Countess. "I shall go to Australia, while my tour boats here will make me rich." "You can't do anything without Nancy Drew's signature," said Etzel. "And now she's dead." The big boat lurched up suddenly, and the Countess let out a scream as she grabbed for the brass railing. She held it to regain her balance, but I noticed in the dim light that her skin had taken on a green pallor. "What am I to do?" she said. "Is this the final solution? Then, with nothing settled for me? The attorney promised me I would have my property. Why, who would think an accident would make so much trouble?" The Countess shook her head dismally. "What accident?" I said. She explained. "I went to see Peter's mother that morning, trying to make sense to that stubborn woman." "Augusta Willits?" I said. The Countess nodded. "But she would not listen, and she talked and talked about selfish foreigners who would not leave her son alone. Can you imagine? I have royal blood, yet she dared to call me a foreigner. Augusta would not keep quiet that morning. She went on, and she drove me insane. Insane, I tell you. I had to stop her from saying anything more. I was desperate, and so I picked up the only thing I could find in that office." "The small cock," I said. "Yes," she said. "I do not know what made me do it. I have never done such a thing before. I am certain that I was completely insane at that time. How else can anyone explain what I did?" "You killed her." "I did not intend to hurt her, only to stop her mouth. But I had pushed the small clock too far back and then held it there too long, and it stopped her breathing. Then everything was quiet. I had a feeling of great relief, and even in this very moment, with us all standing here, I believe the world is a better place without that woman," Etzel said. "I never suspected you." "That was my protection," she said. "No one would think I would kill anyone. I am too refined." I said, "There are some who might disagree." She glared at me. "Say whatever you want, foolish commoner. After today, I will never have to hear your voice again." Then she continued her story. "I would have escaped if someone did not see me leaving the crow's nest after the accident." "Adolf Doberman," I said. "Yes," said the Countess. "Did he see you do it?" "No," she said. "But after he thought about it, he guessed that I was guilty. And he did not hesitate to blackmail me. He even dared to stoop so low as to extort merchandise from my shop. The cad!" "How did you kill him?" I said. I knew Adolf would be interested to buy the Twin Palms, so I told him that Peter had entrusted a special paper to me. A codicil, I believe you call it, which gave me the right to sell the property. Etzel looked hopeful. "There was a codicil?" The boat lurched, and the Countess slumped a little lower. She also got a little greener. "She's lying," I muttered. "Do not use that word," said the Countess. "It was the only way to settle the injustices brought up to me by Herr Doberman." I told him a story, and he was so greedy he believed me. And then I waited for him at the Twin Palms. That man was soft, so weak, he was almost sickly. "His wallet certainly wasn't," said Etzel. "I deserved to take that from him," said the Countess. "He had stolen so much from me." I asked, "Did you trick Jerry Keir into going to the Twin Palms to get her painting back?" The Countess shrugged. "Someone had to look guilty." And you took the painting back to gallery? Yes, said the Countess. And you used Ken's red Range Rover to do it all? The Countess replied woozily. I told him I had to take Herr Dobermann's large shipment of merchandise to the post office, and he believed me. Poor thing. Before I returned the car, I took it to be washed because of the mud, and Kenneth never imagined that I could do such things. Yeah, talk about denial. What fools men are, said the Countess. She was limp and quite green by that time, and was grappling desperately onto the brass railing around the viewing glass. Fools, she said again, aiming the epithet at Etzel. From the beginning, Adolf was deceiving you and the lawyer. He stupidly boasted to me that he would acquire all of Peter's property directly from Augusta. But unfortunately, the accident made that impossible. Still, Adolf had another plan. One more joke to play. His best one, he said. You know that overseas company you were all planning to sell the property to? Etzel uttered the words like a holy chant. Das noch Kapitalist, Halladiasch, Resorten, Graben, Gaslacht, Gumpach. Yes, said the Countess. That one. It belonged to Adolf. She laughed, a cruel, disarming laugh. Americans will never understand the dark side of business. It didn't sound so devilishly clever to me, buying the same property twice. But despite the Countess's fabulously peroration, she had one glaring performance flaw. She was utterly seasick. And during the woozy silence that followed her last words, I saw my chance to get away. I had to save myself, for without me alive, who was going to save Ross? I turned and tore up the metal stairway. Behind me, the Countess shouted to Etzel, After him! Up on deck, it was like a raging storm in Moby Dick. All wind and rain and tidal waves. Well, maybe not tidal waves. Etzel was soon up the stairs after me, and he somehow had got hold of a gun. Nancy Drews, or Cozy's, I guess, because he came out of the hatchway, firing wildly. I scrambled about for shelter on the listing deck. He fired again. I made a dash for cover behind a huge metal vent pipe. But the boat tilted up suddenly in front of me, knocking me off balance and off my feet. I grabbed onto the decking to keep myself from sliding off into the water. Etzel fired again, and that time he connected with my thigh. It hit like a knife on the end of a baseball bat. So much for the strongest part of my body. Was fate trying to break my spirit? But it was no time to get picky about gunshot wounds. Better one to the densest, fleshiest part of me than a direct hit to the heart or the brain. Then I made a quick, perhaps stupid decision. Out there on the pitching deck, warm blood flowing onto my cold, wet pants, I decided to play dead while watching my pursuer through squint eyes. It was risky because Etzel might come and shoot me in the head, just to make sure. But with all the motion of the boat, he'd have to come close to do it, and with that advantage, I had a slim chance of survival. If he came within range of my legs, I'd kick him down with the good one. Maybe, and get that gun away from him. I heard him stagger toward me as the boat heaved and lurched in the water. I half expected the coup de grace to my head, but instead I heard the Countess clomping unsteadily up the metal stairs, leading onto the deck. Then she appeared in the hatchway. What happened? She asked, holding tight to the stair rail. Etzel stammered. I shot him. I think I killed him. I can't believe I killed someone. This is awful. The Countess yelled back. Are you sure he's dead? I think so, replied Etzel. My God, what have I done? Get a hold of yourself, said the Countess. You must shoot him again in the head, just to make sure. No, he said. No, I can't. I don't want any more blood on my hands. Blood? Squawked the Countess. You worry about blood. What about all the minds you killed with your writing? While they argued over the delicate matter of my demise, I slithered over so cautiously across the pitching deck, using the giant swells to help me slip little by little away from them. Since you're so smart, said Etzel, you kill him. I cannot, she said. There is too much motion, and I cannot stand by myself. Don't be so weak. Just shoot him. No, Edsel replied. "I've done enough." "Very well," said the Countess. "Help me off the boat, then, and I will shoot him from the dock. He knows too much. He must be eliminated." "And then what?" said Edsel. "Will you kill me, too?" "Why should I? I know as much as he does." "Too bad you don't know when to shut up, Edsel." Then the boat lurched up again, high 45 degrees, maybe more. My grip was tentative, and I felt my body slipping on the deck. I grabbed cautiously with my good leg, trying not to bring attention to myself, but I couldn't stop my body once it began moving, and finally I slid off the deck like an omelet from a fry pan. "Look! Look!" cried the Countess. "He got away!" The water was warm, but it was deep and deadly turbulent. The salt stung my wound. I stifled a cry, for that would only provoke the Countess or Edsel to shoot me in the water. I grappled onto the hull of the boat, searching for any patch of friction to keep my head above the water. "You must shoot him!" cried the Countess. "Quickly, go! I cannot! You must do it now!" "No!" said Edsel. "You do it!" She said, "Weak, foolish men!" And despite the wind and the rain and the pounding waters, I actually heard the Countess clomping up the last few stairs and coming out onto the deck. She yelled at Edsel, "Since you forced me to shoot him, I must now apologize to you." "No!" cried Edsel. "Not me! Don't! I don't want to kill again." "Please!" he wailed. "Don't make me shoot! Don't!" I heard the volley from up on deck, then silence. The rain and wind continued. Not even murderous humanity could change its course. I waited for whoever had survived the onslaught to lean out over the deck and finish me off too. But it never happened. Instead, the boat lurched up again, higher than it had so far. It almost looked like the huge, slick hull was going to tip and capsize onto me. Just as I felt myself being pushed under, I sensed two bodies plummet past me into the water. The boat righted itself, and I saw the two of them, Edsel and the Countess, floating a little distance away from me, bobbing almost calmly in the raging water. They stayed like that a few moments, then sank slowly. The Countess made a particularly lovely picture with her phosphorescent blue turban, slowly unwinding as she sank into the turbulent depths. That crisis past, I realized I could work my way around the tour boat's hull to the wharf, where I could embrace one of the sturdy pilings rather than struggle to stay afloat with a tenuous hold on the boat's slippery hull. By the time I slid my way around the boat, the Coast Guard and the cops arrived. They cleared the cabin of bodies at the same time they rescued me, sloshing around in the dark, heaving waters. I told them that the Countess and Edsel had slid off the deck into the water. They laid me on a gurney next to Ross's just as they wheeled attorney Nancy L. Drew's body away. I guess the world just wasn't big enough for two Nancy Drews. And I was glad they'd covered Ross up, out of modesty, if not protection from the elements. Who would have guessed a professional stripper was shy to be naked in public in front of me? Then who should come and place a cool hand on my forehead but Cozy Dinette? "Help!" I called out. With everything I knew now, she'd certainly kill me. "Help!" I screamed. "Shh!" went Cozy. "Calm down. I'm a good guy." "You are? Didn't you know? But you were dead." Cozy's grin luminesced in the whirling storm around us. She leaned close to my ear and murmured, "Bulletproof bustier." "Bulletproof? Geez, Boston, pipe down. Are you trying to blow my cover?" "You're a cop?" "I guess you're not as smart as I thought," she said, "or else it's still the best-kept secret on the Keys. No wonder you were always around. Someone had to look out for you, Boston. Next thing, you'll be telling me Ross is a cop, too." "I'll let you find out for yourself." Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold. To offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides. And in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.